Block quotes in Markdown make it easy to include quotations in your documents. These are rendered specially by the browser, and you'll see them used to quote from other web pages, books, movies, or even from interviews. Let's take a look at the basics of creating a block quote, as well as some more advanced uses. So let's say that we wanted to make it clear that this first line here is actually a quotation. Now to create a block quote for it, we're just going to go to the very start of the line and then type a greater than sign. You can see that after adding this, and I'll typically add a space afterwards just to make things look a little nicer, you can see that we are now getting this nicely rendered quote over here in the Markdown document. This is making it very clear that this is not part of our normal text in the rest of the document, and is instead a quotation. Block quotes can contain pretty much any of the normal Markdown elements as well. So you can use inline markup, such as making text bold or italic. So I could go and make those first characters bold, for instance. You can see that's rendering differently, but still inside of the block quote. And you can also go and include things like a list. You could have a list inside your block quote. You could have a code block inside of your block quote. So almost all of the Markdown elements can be used inside of a block quote as well. Now, once you start a block quote, the block quote will typically continue until you hit a blank line or other element that is going to disrupt it. So let's say our text was actually broken up like this over multiple lines. Notice how even though there is not a greater than sign at the start of the second line here, this is still considered part of the block quote. So it's still being rendered the exact same way. Really, only once we hit a blank line or something else like the start of a list is the block quote going to be disrupted. Now, if we were in this case and we actually wanted our block quote to extend down to this line where we actually do have a blank line, all we have to do to extend the block quote is add greater than signs at the start of these lines as well. So I'll add a greater than sign here, add another one here, and as well as a space just to make it look a little nicer. And now you can see we have a single block quote that is including all of the content over that we have marked up over on the left-hand side. If you're wanting to include the author of the quotation somewhere in this as well, so in this case we want to make it clear that this is something Wayne Gretzky said, you can typically just use the text, or you can actually use HTML to make it even more clear. So we could go in here, and instead of just having the text that is saying, here's the citation, or here's who said it, we can actually use the HTML cite tag here. So this is just a normal HTML tag. And once we write this, notice how it's being rendered slightly differently. Again, just that's something the browser is doing automatically. And it's now making it very clear that this block quote is associated with this citation. Now, one final other cool thing is that we can actually create nested block quotes. And for this, we're basically taking advantage of the fact that a block quote can contain other Markdown, which itself could be a block quote. So if we went to the first line here, we can just see a quick demo of this by adding, instead of just a single greater than sign, we could actually add two. And once we add this, you can see that we now actually have two of the block quote elements. So it has two of these little bars over on the left-hand side in the rendered Markdown that is making it clear that, hey, this is actually a block quote inside of another block quote. Now, in this specific instance, we could use this to make it clear that this is all going to be a quotation said by Michael Scott down here. So let's just go in and on all of these lines here, we're going to add a second level of block quotes. So we're going to add second levels of block quotes here. And then for the outer quotation, we just need a single level of block quotes. So we've just added the greater than sign at the start of those lines. This is going to be treated as a second level block quote. So you can see this is the inner quote that's getting rendered over here. Here is the outer quote. And finally, as a last step here, we can just go and use proper cite tags. And now we have a block quote that is being referenced or quoted by another block quote here. When you're dealing with nested block quotes, if you want the quote to continue, just make sure you're using the correct number of opening greater than signs. So if we just had a single level here, so we just had a single greater than sign, this is now actually going to be broken up into two separate block quotes for one here and one here. So you just always want to make sure that you're properly continuing things to get a continuous block quote, which is what we want in this case. So that's a quick look at block quotes in Markdown. If you're ever needing to quote from a TV show, movie, other web page, book, something like that, they're a great way to make sure the text is rendered differently and clearly differentiated from the rest of your document.